Well, I'm going to be saying Norah Diedrich for the next many, many years, like hopefully like till I can't say it anymore, because we're so excited to have you as the Tucson Museum
Thank you.
director. It's and we don't want you to ever leave.
I'm excited about it, and really, thrilled that I have this opportunity, and can't wait to spend some time in Tucson. I've been there all of 48 hours or so at this point. So,
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to see and a lot to get to know in Tucson. We have
yeah.
Norah Diedrich on. She is going to be our new director at the Tucson Museum of Art, and she's coming from the Newport Museum of Art in Newport, Rhode Island. That's all correct, right?
That's right.
And
Exactly.
and will you be starting at the first of the year?
Pretty much January 3rd
Yeah.
is my start date. So start off the year with a great new job.
Yeah.
And I have a place to live, which is wonderful. So I'm going to
Uh-huh.
be in the Monnier apartment buildings, which I'm excited to experience, and have my movers set up, and we'll fly. Bought a one-way ticket
Yeah.
to
Yeah, that's got to be weird, right?
yeah.
Is that the first one-way ticket you've ever done in your life, you think?
I think in a very long time.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. I think the last one was to Newport from Chicago. So,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
same deal then, I guess, huh?
So my sister and her family live in Phoenix, which
Oh, nice.
is wonderful. So I will fly there, and when my moving truck says, gives me their ETA, they'll drive me down to Tucson, which is great.
Well, you're going to love January in Tucson versus Newport, Rhode
Yeah.
Island. Yeah, little different. Uh,
Yeah.
though I will say, I'm just going to warn you, the first week in January is usually the coldest week of the year in Arizona, in Tucson at least. So, we might get down to 30, you know.
Oh, well, we're in the 20s already. So,
Yeah, no. It's this week's going to be mid 70s, I think,
yeah, that's great.
with maybe an 80 here and there later this
Terrific.
week. So yeah, the leaves haven't changed. They're still very green. Fall
Nice.
comes basically second week in December and lasts for a week, 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really don't have a fall. So unless you go up
Right.
onto the mountains, which we do, we have a mountain. We have Mount Lemon, which you can go skiing on if you like to ski, and it gets cold and it gets snow, and it's 45 minutes away.
Well, I have my cross country skis here, and I've used them all of 0 times because it snows here, but it does not stick.
Yeah, I
And
would think.
so, yeah, I love to ski. It'd be great.
Well, we've got Flagstaff, which is close. I'm sure they've given you all these kind of things, and when they were trying to entice you to leave Newport, Rhode Island, to come to Tucson, Arizona, which is a big switch, right? I mean, that is a big cultural switch, if nothing else.
It will be. It will be. But it will be fun to, learn a whole new collection, topography, people. I want to learn Spanish. That's been on my list for a long time. I studied French in school and worked at a French cultural organization, so I have that language. Not completely fluent, but I can't wait to begin to learn Spanish. That'll be great. And
Yeah.
Newport is a seasonal town as well. I mean,
Yes.
it's obviously opposite Tucson, but our population swells by more than half in the summer.
Right.
And, right now it's everybody's on a plane going to Palm
Florida.
Beach,
Yeah.
and so our museum has had to adjust to that because it's fairly drastic, and I imagine Tucson is somewhat the same.
Yeah.
Perhaps not as drastic, but
Um, yeah, I bet it isn't quite as drastic.
yeah.
Yeah, because Newport has such a wealth factor that they all do have the ability to go somewhere. And Tucson's I think, especially the museum is more of a community museum. There's more people that are coming year round. And, from my gallery point of view, I can just speak on that.
Right.
We can clearly see when it changes. Usually it's about May 8th. That's usually the day when people start to go back. I just have watched it over the years. And, then they come back generally about now, right before
Right.
Thanksgiving, so, and it'll be busy from here on out. When you come, it's going to be January, February, March are by far the busiest months. And so you kind of hit the ground really running because, it's just going to be busy. There's lots of stuff, lots of activities, and of course you're the new person. Everybody wants to meet Norah. Have you met Norah? No, I haven't met Norah, but I want to meet Norah. So you'll have all that kind of stuff coming, but
Great.
that's
Good.
not new, right? You've been a museum director for a long time, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been in Newport almost 8 years.
Yes.
And before that was the director of the Evanston Art Center. And it operated just like a museum, but it was a Kunststil model. So, of course, no permanent collection. Had a very large educational program. But essentially, it was the same budget size as the Newport Art Museum. We were in a historic building on Lake Michigan, you know, up in Evanston, and
Mhm.
had buildings up there. Same staff size, same board size. So it was really kind of exactly the same, but no collection, which is really one reason I wanted to take the job in Newport, so I could learn about
Mm,
acquisitions and deaccessioning and loans and et cetera, et cetera. And
right.
it's been wonderful for that. So,
And so let's go back. I would like to find out a
mm,
little bit more about you just so we can, I don't know if you've watched any of my podcasts, but I like to kind of get
wow.
a hit good. So you know what's coming, a kind of a history of, how you became who you are. And
Yeah.
that really begins in early childhood. So where did you
Yeah.
grow up?
So Chicago suburbs,
Mm,
a little bit south of the city, and then west of the city. Oldest of four. So I have my sister who's in Phoenix, and then I have twin brothers who are 5 years younger.
mm,
And I can honestly say I was interested in drawing from a very early age. Did a lot of drawing. A lot of coloring books and freehand. And fortunately, we had a neighbor who was taking their daughter to the Art Institute of Chicago on Saturdays for an art class.
mm.
And I was able to go with. And I think I was maybe 8 or 9. And at that time, the children's classes were actually held in the Art Institute of Chicago. So they were in the
Wow.
museum, the lower level, and the Craft Education Center. So, walking past, have you been to the Art Institute?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So walking by those lions and up the steps
Uh-huh.
and, into that grand lobby, I was just all set to live there in that
You were
beautiful
like third
space.
grader at that time, second,
Something
third?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
it
what were
was
your
great.
parents? What did they do? Were they interested in art or what were their professions?
Well, a blue collar background. And my father had, even though he was blue collar workers, somewhere back there in his history was a love of the arts and particularly classical music.
Hmm.
And so that, we would go home and Scheherazade would be on, or Victory of the Sea, or something was always playing in the background, which was really kind of a odd juxtaposition for a man who had the kind of work he had.
What did he do?
So it was interesting, and my son ended up going into classical music as a bassoon player. So
Wow. I
somehow
played
that
the
was
bassoon. I know how hard that is. It's a hard instrument,
very,
double
very
reading.
difficult.
So your dad was working the, typical kind of 8 to 5 job, hard job. And but yet he had a love for classical music, which you were around all the time. And did you go to museums other than the art institute? Did you also did they go to museums and go see? Because you have that
Not
opportunity.
really.
No, not
No,
really.
not really. It was. I mean, they encouraged all of us to follow our passion,
Yes.
and for me, that was art. But I think the Art Institute and Museum of Science and Industry and Planetarium, that we went to museums, but they weren't necessarily, other than the Art Institute, uh, art museums.
Hmm.
So, but we had that experience, and we did do that as a family.
You did go to those museums as a family?
To the other museums, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very important to have that.
Yeah, I think early engagement. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. It's essential for
Yes.
many young people. And I am a very huge advocate for field trips, and we see the kids come into the museum, and most of them have not been inside a museum. They don't know how to behave. They don't know how to move.
Right.
It's really something. So fortunately, I had that.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of third graders that are going to come over in December to look at rugs, and we're going to talk about rugs. So
Very good.
I'm right with you on that. I think
Yeah.
it's critical to have that kind of engagement, and you just like yourself, you're going at 8 or 9 to a major institution of art, and understanding that's a pathway. There's things you can do there. And when you did that, were you at that point in your own mind kind of like an artist in your own mind, and I'm the class artist type of thing? Do you think that was
Yeah.
by yourself?
Absolutely. It was a very long time ago, so it's a fuzzy memory, but I do remember they had a vitrine at the school in the Art Institute. And, we would put our clay objects or drawings on display. And so we knew what it felt like to have your artwork, your masterpiece,
Right,
for others to see and enjoy.
right.
And I continued that through high school. So I was, always in the art program, and that just it never ended, quite
You the
frankly.
class artist. There always seems to be like one of these individuals that's kind of the class artist that everyone goes, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I was in that crowd,
yeah,
in that cool art crowd.
yeah,
But
and
we also, I think, similar to the former director, for some reason, we were all involved in competitive swimming,
mm,
and that was, we all so we had sports. And for me, I had the arts, and it was kind of took up most of our time. We didn't get into too much trouble because we had double workouts.
mm,
So
I got it. And were
yeah,
you a good swimmer?
yeah, I was. My brothers were very good, and they had full rides to college
Oh wow.
with swimming. So yeah, I kind of discovered boys in high school, and that was it for the swimming.
Yeah, so much for swimming. I would rather go have
Yeah,
some fun time with the
yeah,
opposite sex.
yeah,
Yeah, I get that. So, but you were a good swimmer, and do you still swim?
yeah. I love to swim.
Well, that you'll love Tucson. Yeah.
I am very excited about that. I've heard all about Reed Park as one
Yep.
option.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's lots of different places for swimming.
yeah. So
Lots
that's
and
terrific.
lots. And lots of lots of competitive swimmers in this town too.
Great.
Yeah. So maybe you'll want to compete again, you know? Yeah.
No, thank you.
No, that's past.
Yeah.
So when you finish high school, what do you think you're going to go into? Do you have an idea of where you're headed at that point?
Well, for me and all of us in my family, it was a privilege to go to college. I mean, that was really something that we all took seriously, and I did. And I studied hard. I worked hard, and I did very well. And I was an art student for, I would say, three-quarters of the way through. And my parents, uh, oldest of four, they got a little nervous, and they said, Nora, we think you should switch into something where you will
Make a living.
make a living. Sounds familiar to
Is it,
many
and this was in college that they did this?
in college. Yes.
And at
Yeah.
that time in college, you were in the art department?
Yes. University of Illinois, studio arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that has to
Yeah.
be kind of a devastating conversation in a lot of ways, right?
Yes, it was, it was a while ago, but I felt that I was where I wanted to be. And so I made a little bit of a curve, and I went into the College of Communications, and ended up in the creative end of that, basically advertising, marketing.
Mm.
And quite frankly, that turned out to be fantastic because when I graduated, for about 2 months, I had a TA position and I stayed. So I was going to go to graduate school. And changed my mind. None of my friends were there. And a couple of them had moved to Manhattan. So that's what I did. I quit the graduate school track and moved to New York City. And for about 8 years, worked as a copywriter in some really small, creative, wonderful ad agencies.
Mm.
And had a great time. We just got to know New York City top to bottom. And that was a great time to be there because you could afford to be there. There were rent controlled apartments. The art scene from the 70s was not quite over. You know, there were a lot of galleries in Soho and the West Village that were still thriving.
Mm-hmm.
There were artist studios down in, Broome and Broadway where I lived. So it was kind of before gentrification down there.
Mm.
And it was a great art scene and a great advertising time to be in advertising in New York. Worked for some wonderful clients, big clients, small clients, BMW, IBM, Nikon. I mean,
And
it
what
was
would
great.
you
And
do?
I'll use those skills now.
What is that? What was your job? What would you do in a copyright?
Well, we were teamed up.
Mm.
So I was the writer
Yes,
and worked with a graphic designer.
yes.
And we just came up with campaigns.
And what
And
years was that? When was that?
so I moved there at the very end of 1979.
Yeah,
And the city was rough. That was, I can't remember who the mayor was. Was it Ed Koch?
it was. I think it was Ed Koch.
They had blackouts and,
Yeah, that was 77. I remember going, I was there when they had a big blackout. I remember it very
right.
well. Yeah.
And then by 1980, it was really kind of cleaned up. And so yeah, we, teamed up and we created campaigns, worked with the client. Uh, that was in the day, and it was nobody had a cell phone.
Right. They didn't have
this,
computers, really, basically, not much.
no, I mean everything was by hand, and
Right.
the studio, everything was cut and laid out and photographed, and then after a while, I kind of moved up, and then I was a creative director for a while. So then you oversee the teams that are working on accounts. But I learned a lot about, learning about a product you didn't know about, and a client you didn't know, and coming up with something totally creative and wonderful and selling it. So
did you ever feel like, when you're doing this, because you're still an artist at heart, right? I mean,
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And they're making the art, you're doing the writing, the copyright, but do you ever go, I kind of wish I was doing the artwork instead of maybe the writing? Did that enter into your thought pattern at all?
Well, that's when I bought a Leica camera.
Mm.
So, and a couple lenses, and the International Center for Photography at that time was up on Fifth Avenue in a beautiful brownstone. And Cornell Kappa was still involved. So I started taking, photo, darkroom, studio, and really got into photography, which I hadn't done in college.
Got it.
And, really started getting involved and continued with photo for quite a number of years. But that, in New York City, that's when I picked up a camera and a couple of lenses.
And were you showing at any galleries at that point? Did you go, yeah, maybe this is a potential way for me at all?
Not until I moved back to Chicago in the early 90s. So I married my art director, and we moved to Seattle for a couple of years, and both ended up working for the same agency, Livingston Company in Seattle. And that was fantastic, to be on that coast. And we went up to Vancouver and the San Juan Islands and Oregon coast. So that was fabulous, and had 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was transferred to Chicago. And so for me, that was going home.
And when you were there, and that was in Seattle?
Right.
Yeah. What was he doing? Was he doing art? Was he working for advertising in the art world, or as an art director, or what was?
Art director.
Yeah, so he's an artist as well then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what kind of art does he do?
He still does some watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly works in watercolors. But at that time, he was, a designer, art director at an agency.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what that time, did you continue to work in marketing, or did you do you're having kids too, so that always adds another complexity.
Yeah. Well, we were hired by the same agency, so for a while, I worked at the same
Yeah, got it.
agency.
Yeah. It's a package deal when you went there.
Yeah, I guess. And yeah, I did photo though. I did photo there. I remember working with the woman who did all the photo for Dale Chihuly, the glass artist,
Mm-hmm.
up at Pilchuk's, his studio up there. And she worked in a darkroom out of Seattle. And so I remember doing that. Yeah, I didn't totally do childcare, for a little bit.
Yeah.
But when I got back to Chicago, that's when I really seriously got into teaching photo. I
Oh.
worked a lot with Polaroid materials,
Mm.
Polaroid transfers and SX70s. And I mean, that film was just like so much fun.
Right.
And ended up taking a class from a couple of classes at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with Barbara Crane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that name.
I have.
She passed away a couple years ago. She was fantastic. She had gone to IIT, the new Bauhaus
Mm-hmm.
in Chicago, and studied under Aaron Siskin, photographer. And she was a big Polaroid person, and so she helped me a lot with Polaroid, learning it, teaching it. I ended up kind of a part-time gig working for the Polaroid Corporation as a creative uses consultant, and just went around universities and high schools, and they gave me lots of free film, and I showed people how to pull it apart and brayer it and
That
experiment
must
with
have
it.
been fun.
It was great fun.
Yeah.
It was great fun.
It
I
sounds like a
actually had
book.
an opportunity to I won a contest that Polaroid had, and the prize was 30 sheets of film on their 20 by 24 camera.
Oh, wow.
So that camera was at Columbia College Chicago then, and a photographer by the name of Dawood Bey, who was a Yale graduate and teaching at Columbia College Chicago. He was doing a fabulous series of Chicago public high school students, diptychs. And
Mm-hmm.
so they
Frozen for a moment. We'll see if we unfreeze
camera
you.
was there for him, experience that camera. That was amazing.
And so just repeat that because you froze for a second.
Yeah. So Dawood Bey,
Mm-hmm.
the camera was there in Chicago, the 20 by 24. It was I think there were 5 cameras produced at that size. This was one out of Boston.
Mm.
And I won a silly little Polaroid contest, and
Yeah, I
the
heard
prize
that part. Yeah, you got all
was
this film,
30.
right? Yes.
Yeah. So Dawood Bey was shooting a series of diptychs of Chicago public high school students.
Yes.
That's why that was there.
And so have you ever thought about doing a book on, your experiences? I mean, it's a really interesting thing. And, Polaroid has all come back in its own form or fashion.
Yeah.
And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people would actually find it very interesting.
Yeah. As I was packing to move, I kind of opened some of the photo boxes, and there's a lot of work there that I would at some point, and a lot of negatives that I would like to go through at some point and just see what I've got, you know.
Right. So you start teaching photography in Chicago, and you work for Polaroid for a bit too. And then so where does your trajectory go from there?
Well, I put a dark room into my home
Mm,
in the basement, and bought a 2 1/4 Hasselblad, and did some work with that. Did a lot of printing, and I did have gallery representation in Chicago, and work in a few public, few private collections. So that was a good, you know, 5 6 years of really focusing on photo.
mm,
And but my children were in school, and I was spending more money on photo than making money on
yeah.
photo. And noticed a open house at Northwestern University, and they advertised certificate programs, and there was one in museum studies, and I thought, aha, this is what I'm doing next. And even though I was teaching photo at the Evanston Art Center at that time and kind of running that studio, I enrolled in Northwestern's Museum Studies Certificate program, which is about a 2 year program,
Mm.
and quite wonderful. And
You said aha, and so it really was an aha moment. And why was that
yeah, it
aha
was.
moment? I mean, did you just realize, okay, I can't do this as a living as a photographer? I love museums. I've been in them all my life. I like art. Maybe this is a pathway.
I think so. I mean, maybe it goes back to the 8 year old who walked into the Art Institute of Chicago. I mean, you know, museums were my life, from high school on. And whenever I traveled, all I did was go to museums.
Uh, yeah,
That's what I did when I lived in New York City.
right.
It was all about art and all about museums. And I thought if I could work in a museum and make that a career, then I could marry, you know, wages with my
Love.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the aha moment. You saw it by serendipity. You see this ad, you go, you get into the
Yeah.
program, and it's a 2 year program, right? And so what happened when you started doing that? Did it click right there? Did you go, this really is, I can see it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they had some really wonderful teachers in the program
I
because
bet.
they could pick people from major museums in the
Yeah.
city. And the Mexican Museum of Fine Arts, which is in Pilsen, the Pilsen area, which is still thriving today. The director went to a breakfast with other museum leaders. It was towards the end of my program. And he was talking to Wendy Woon, who was the then director of education at the MCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago.
Hmm.
And she was looking for volunteers to work in her department. And he said, I know of someone.
Hmm.
She's in our program and just about done. And he connected us. And so I interviewed for a volunteer program. That's how competitive it was.
Wow.
They didn't pay you, but you still had to interview. And so Wendy brought me aboard, and I did that for probably a full year. And then 2 women in the department had become pregnant, had their babies, and they did not return. And there I was. So I kind of snuck in and ran the public programs and adult education. And at the time, they had a kids camp in the summer.
Hmm.
And so that was really fantastic. That was a great experience for a number of years, a couple of years at the MCA.
Mm. And I'm sure they loved having you because you had all this corporate, ability too, because you
Right.
had, right? I mean, you were
Yeah.
running different programs. And so
Hmm.
after a few years, what happens from that point?
So there didn't seem to be any movement up in
Yes.
the MCA, and I thought, well, maybe I'll look. Let's see what else is happening. And as it turns out, I took a job at the Alliance Française in Chicago because I minored in French.
Mm.
And it was just down the street from the MCA in a beautiful brownstone. And they hired me, and I ran all of their cultural programs
Mm.
for about 5 years, and had a trip to a French-speaking country every year, which
Mm.
was
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
not so bad. And my job was to find somebody to who would come back to Chicago and do a program. So we did programs on wine and food and textiles and culinary, performance art. So it was just, it was always something different. And quite frankly, it was fascinating to work with people from all over the world, and the common bond being the French language.
Hmm.
And so that was fascinating, and I learned a great deal and traveled a bit. So it was great.
Yeah, we think culturally, it just anything that adds to your, horizons of what you see and experience it, it
Mm,
all adds to the, to the whole component of who you are and how you see the world and art, especially. So I get
right,
it. It seems, these
right,
are all building blocks that I see as being important, aspects into, the complexity of who you are, right? Which is this is what we
right.
get. We're fortunate in Tucson because we're going to get all these backgrounds. One of the guys that works for me speaks fluent French and worked at and got his degree at the Sorbonne, and so well,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So when you finished this job, then where did you head? What was the next component after the French
So
culture?
while I was there, I figured if I wanted to continue with a career, that I needed a master's. I needed
Right,
another degree.
right.
So signed up for a master's in nonprofit management and at Spertus College, and went to work and then went to class at night, a couple nights a week, and that was another 2+ years.
Hmm.
And just as I was finishing that degree, I sent my resume into the Evanston Arts Center. They were
Hmm.
looking for a director, and ended up taking that job. So that was my next move. And I hadn't been an executive director of an arts organization
Right.
until then, and that was fascinating. So we accomplished a great deal there. Uh, Grew the program. The educational programming was already outstanding, um, and this was a organization that you know it had been in this historic building since 1966. It began in the 1920s as an art association, which a lot of
Hmm.
museums, that was a trajectory. And people like Carrie James Marshall,
Wow.
the painter Carrie James Marshall, he
Yeah,
was on the
love.
faculty.
Oh,
You
wow.
know,
Did you
we
get a did you get a
exhibited one of.
painting for the Evanston Art Museum by Carrie James Marshall, I hope?
Yeah, well, no,
Oh,
that would have been nice.
yeah, it would have been
That
nice.
would have been, that would have been worth something
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
And we showed one of Nick Cave's early sound suits, one of his twig suits, which was really early on. So,
Yeah.
we had access to these amazing Chicago artists.
Yeah.
So it was quite a place. And towards the end of my time there, I think I was there 5 years. We had to move, so
Mm,
that we were in a city-owned building, paid the city $1 a year. It's not
right.
unusual. The MCA and the Art Institute do the same thing in Chicago. So
Hmm.
they're on city-owned property,
Mm.
uh, and we were too. And the city manager decided we were not the highest and best use of that building,
Oh, God.
and so we were on a tight timeline, and were served 2 eviction notices. So I went to many city council meetings, and we found a building. So we raised money for that, found it, and I moved right when the renovation was just about done, moved to
Wow.
Newport.
That had to be incredibly
And it worked
stressful.
very well.
Yeah, that had to be
Yeah.
very stressful though.
Oh, it was horrifying, just
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. What do you do if you
Really.
don't have a building and they kick you out? I mean, where does the art go?
Yes, and then that building sat there empty, boarded up for 5 more years.
Mm. Well, again, the bureaucracy you learn to deal with, in cities, states, government, institutions, right?
Yeah.
So, but
So,
that's great
and they,
training for you
yeah,
for every museum that you go to afterwards, you know how to raise money, you know how to deal with a crisis. That's a crisis. That's a existential crisis when they
yeah,
say
that
you're out
really
of your
was.
building. Can't even imagine what that was like.
Yeah.
I mean, part of you, I would think, want to go, I'm done, drop the mic and just like move on.
Now that's when it gets fun.
Good. I love to hear that. That's good. Hopefully we won't have any of those in Tucson, but
Yeah.
so, and then that's where from there you went to Newport. Is that,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And you did that for 7 years and it's almost 8 years. And then when you're in Newport, you're working on a lot of different programs too. I just looked at your statement from, on the website. You helped redo that website, right? That was one of the things that you worked on.
Right. Yeah. We've done a lot of really large projects like that, and infrastructure projects, and you know we have 3 buildings to our historic. The Griswold House is a Richard Morris Hunt design,
Mm,
1864,
mm,
and that is a outstanding home, and needs to be, well, we maintain 2 of the buildings constantly,
mm.
and there are easements for the state, and the city have easements on those buildings, so you can't just do whatever you want. It has to
Right.
be done correctly. But I think the biggest change we made, and I'm so proud of it, is that we broadened the scope of what the museum was, what we collected,
Mm,
what we showed. And it has really, really, I think, moved the museum in the right direction, particularly over the last couple of years when most, if not all, museums have had to change. I mean, it's a different world. We don't just collect and show work. It's much, much more involved. And we are a community builder because that's what the arts do.
right.
So our diversity and inclusion initiatives, and welcoming other voices into the galleries and collection, working with new partners like Rhode Island Black Storytellers and Conexión Latina, and just
Right.
community organizations, has really, people who did not feel welcome there, all of a sudden, it takes a long time, feel as though they can walk in and see a bit of themselves in the galleries. And so that I'm really happy about that. And it was not an easy change. In Newport, change, you know, even
Right.
in Evanston, we used to tease that the license plate in Evanston should read progress without change, because everyone talked about being progressive, but if you had to change something, nobody voted for it. So
Yeah. And do you make changes like that culturally by changing the exhibits that you take in and do and your collections and the people that you put on the boards and that is that how you can institute those kind of changes?
well, to my mind, I think you start with the culture of the place.
Hmm.
And the culture of the place essentially equals the people.
Right.
I mean, we are, nothing really would happen if, we didn't have the people we have, both staff, volunteers, board. So once you have the people, and you instill a culture that respects what you want to do and supports what you want to do, and really passionately, emotionally believes that you're doing the right thing. I mean, it's mission driven, and the people we've hired believe in the mission. I mean, that is, they just come in and they really believe that they're making a difference in the world,
Hmm.
and the trustees as well. And I think once you have the culture,
Yeah,
then you and smart people, then you just, you make it happen.
yeah. Then the community will follow.
Uh, I think so. If you involve the community, and that's
Right.
one aspect of the Tucson Museum of Art that I really like very much, is that they're bringing indigenous communities into the conversation,
Yep.
and you know incorporating their voices, not once it's done, but while exhibitions are being built,
Yeah,
and
that's right. They are. They
and
just got a
they're,
grant for that as well,
yeah.
which
And
is
so if you I think if you bring the community in and they feel that they are part of the building, they have buy-in. It's not an afterthought, and
right.
it's hard to do. It takes time, it takes patience. We have gone through 2 years of DEAI training in Newport. We
And
followed a program.
explain what that is, DEAI
It's
training.
basically diversity, inclusion, access, and equity.
Yes.
And there are lots of ways to define it. And sometimes it's referred to as DEAI, and sometimes it's IDEA, but basically it's diversity and inclusion. And we followed a program, self-study, by the name of Mass Action, Museums as Sites for Social Action. And it was developed by Kaylin Feldman when she was in Minneapolis, Fine Arts Institute. And it's full of readings and assessments, and um, learning about biases that we all have, and
Right.
talking about it. It's really been, it's ongoing, but we've learned a lot, and we've changed a lot of our policies and procedures. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not just a land acknowledgement statement on the website. We've
Right.
actually,
Right.
we've you have to do some things, or it's
Yeah.
performative, and that's yeah,
Right. You can't just talk the talk. You have to walk the talk.
yeah, I think so. So we've done a lot with that, and
Well, and I think that's one of the things that Tucson Museum of Art has really pushed in the last 15 years is to increase, especially Native, Indigenous voices, Hispanic voices into our, which they should. I mean, that's a good percent of our populace, right? And
right,
we have some of the highest numbers of Native American individuals in the entire country, right? We have 300,000 Dene, Navajo. I mean, we have Hopi, we have Apache, we have Tototum, Pima, Gila River, it just goes on, and they're all, a component of who we are as a community, even though maybe some are here, some are there. But, if you're, a kid from the Navajo reservation and you're going to the U of A, which a lot of kids come down here, it'd be nice if they can come and see, and not in a historical standpoint. That is there too with the, Arizona State Museum. They have a very wonderful collection, but also, in an art setting, I think is important. So I think these
right,
will be some of the things that you'll be dealing with, and hopefully, I'm sure it sounds like embracing.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
And that's got to be fun for you because you have been, especially I looked at the collections of Newport. It's a lot of, early American art. You have 400 Winslow Homer prints and a drawing and all these, very much kind of old school American painting. But now you're going to be, you're going to walk in and see artists you have no idea who they are. I'm sure you'll be like, who is Oscar Burninghouse, or Nikolai Feshin, or all these individuals that we have, which I would think would be a fun thing.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited to learn, really to learn what exactly is in the collection,
Right.
take a look at it,
Right.
and learn about all these artists who I you know haven't heard of and haven't seen, and And, you know, well, you keep seeing more art and seeing more art, and that adds to your, not only your visual vocabulary, but you just, then you, when you look at a piece of artwork, obviously you see it differently because your brain is comparing and
Right.
contrasting,
Exactly.
you know. So, and I'm excited to meet some of the artists. I mean, there's nothing more fun than being with the people who are actually producing the
Right.
art,
I
you know.
agree.
So,
We have
right.
lots, we have lots of openings. We hope to see you come to some of the openings. You know, we
Yeah.
have one basically every month for about 6 months of a different, you know, significant artist that comes and, you know, does an opening. And so
Yeah.
it's a pretty vibrant, I think Tucson has a pretty vibrant art scene. There are a lot of artists that live in Tucson uh,
Mm.
as well. It's, you know, it's an idyllic place to paint and live. You
Yeah.
know, as a smaller town feel, but it's still a big city. You know,
Hmm.
we have, Tucson Museum of Art is a very good quality museum.
Yeah.
And I think has a lot of room to grow. I think it can be, you know, amazing. And Jeremy was able to build on that and did some amazing things, I think, for our museum as far as just adding, you know,
Mm.
additional space, if nothing else,
Yes.
which is a big deal, as you know, having done those kind of
Yes.
drives yourself. And do you have a
Yes.
vision?
Beautiful space.
Yeah, do you have a vision at all of how you're going to attack, you know, this new endeavor of yours? I know there's a lot to go there, but do you something that you feel you can share at least to the people that might be listening? Because a lot of people in Tucson do listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is that I have, and as part of my interview process, I created, it was asked to create a 100-day plan, first 100 days.
Hmm.
So I'm just going to take the first 100 days, give or take, and kind of get through my plan, which is essentially getting to know the people there, the collection, the programming, you know, all of the inside stuff,
Right.
and then taking it to major donors, supporters, and community members. So then kind of an outside look, and then sit down and put it together and see, you know, see where we can begin. I mean, the staff members are absolutely outstanding.
Hmm.
I met most of them kind of on Zoom, and Julie was on Zoom,
Right.
and I met many of the board members and others involved when I was there, and everybody looks fabulous. I mean, they're, you know, doing what they're doing in a high level, and so you know, I sort of want to be the conductor, if you will,
Yes.
and that, you know, I don't want to. I have been in the orchestra pit and still am, and I appreciate it.
Right.
There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work I'm doing now that I love doing, and I have to do because we have a very small staff in Newport.
Right.
But I'm more than ready to move on and just kind of be out there and doing kind of another full-time focused as a real CEO. And you know, I'm really looking forward to that. So I tend to be the visionary, and we'll see what, you know, but first I have to learn.
Right.
I have to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that that's, you know, that's what it should be based on. And I want to hear from lots of people because I think the people there have a vision of what might be next or what needs to be taken care of. So I think I'm going to do a lot of listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you'll have, you know, the push pull, like, does she like contemporary art? Does she like Western art? Does she like native art? Does she like Hispanic art? You know, and all those things.
She likes it all.
I was gonna say, there you go. That's the right answer, I think. And it's interesting. I think, you know, like I belong to both the contemporary art group as well as the Western art group. In fact, I signed up for the contemporary art group going on to Minneapolis today.
Oh.
you know, which is looks like it's going to be fantastic. And I'll do
Yeah,
the same with the Western art patron thing. So,
right.
and there are a lot of us, I think, that like both. We're very interested in both. I mean, I have a gallery that's dedicated primarily to Native and Western art, but I also have modern art, and I love modern art, and I love all that thing. So I think you'll find in Tucson that there are a group of people that, you know, can blend in all areas.
Mhm.
So, and that, I think the museum kind of reflects that too. I think we,
Hmm.
you know, I do. I see, you know, we have I have a very strong component of Western Native art, which I love, and we're growing the Native part. But we also have some great, you know, contemporary art. We have Marston Hartley's, you know, we have other
Yeah,
things. Um,
yeah.
so that, I think that will be a fun component and an interesting component for you, just learning, you know, the who likes what, you know, where our museum, as you said, in your first 100 days, really understand what the collection entails and what that can allow us to do. And a lot of, you'll see there's a there is a strong component of really great Western and Native arts there,
Yeah.
which we hope we continue to grow as well as contemporary. I want to see it all grow personally.
Well, I was impressed with the entire building,
Yes,
and but the gallery with the indigenous
right.
works that Christopher had worked on was,
Yes.
wow. I mean, that work, I just, the likes of which I'd never seen, and the interpretive materials. I had a hard time leaving that gallery, quite
Nice.
frankly. So
Uh-huh.
it just was fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna have fun because you get to be a kid again, right? In a weird way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like going to from when you left New York to Seattle, you know, it's a whole new adventure and different learning, you know, aspects. You probably did learn about Curtis though when you were in Seattle, didn't you? Edward Curtis, the
Oh
photographer.
yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would figure you probably did. You ever know Flurry Company? She was there. He
No.
specialized in Curtis's. So
Fleury, right?
yes,
No?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Lois.
Vaguely.
Her first name is Lois Flurry, but
Okay.
yeah, she was a
Yeah.
big Curtis person. But and then of course the photography component too. You'll get to hopefully add to that,
Oh
or
yeah.
because you have an interest and a knowledge in that area. So when you come
Yeah.
out and visit my gallery, you can come look at our Dorothea Langs and Ansel Adams
Ooh,
that we have in the Maynard Dixon Museum. So
that sounds wonderful.
yeah, no,
That's
those are your
great.
kind of thing. So is there anything else that you would like to add as we kind of wrap this up, as far as to, you know, the people in Tucson that are coming to soon be a part of it? You'll be a Tucsonian?
Mhm. Well, just really that I'm thrilled to be headed out there. I think this is really a great next step for me, and I really am excited to meet the community, learn about the community, and make a difference. I want to contribute, and I think now more than ever we need the arts. I mean, of course I'm biased, but when I see the divisiveness in this country and I watch how the arts can bring people together
Yes,
in a real civic minded, public square situation, and the arts do it like nothing else,
yes.
nothing else. And I remember reading Ralph Rugoff is the curator at the Haywood Gallery in London, and he was the curator of the 58th Venice Biennale.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 2019, and the title of the show was "May We Live in Interesting Times." And basically, his premise, and I totally agree with it, is that the meaning of artworks, and I'm paraphrasing, the meaning of artworks do not reside in the objects themselves, but in conversations. And he seems to think first between the artist and the artwork, then between the artwork and the viewer,
Mm-hmm.
and then between broader publics.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, the meaning and the real importance of a show, of an exhibition, is not what happens in the gallery. It's what happens what the viewers do with it, with that experience once they leave. Does it change the way they think about someone else or a different culture? Does it change the way they live? It's what people bring with them, and
Yes.
everybody brings something else. But I just I kind of take that to heart, and I love that.
And they can make, I mean, exhibits can change the way your trajectory of your life, and it does and has for many, many people, especially if
Yeah,
you're an artist. You see something that you just go, oh my God. I mean,
yeah,
it's changes the way you see the world. And my
mhm,
feeling about art is always has to produce some kind of an emotion. I don't care what it
totally.
is. It can be a good
Yeah,
one, it can be a bad one, but there should be something that
yeah,
comes out of that interaction with art. And
mhm,
then that leads to exactly what you're talking about, a bigger picture, a bigger dynamic. What is that painting trying to say to me and or the world, or how do I see it, even if the artist may have not even seen it that way.
yeah.
So I agree with you
There's,
wholeheartedly.
yeah. There's one experience that I'll maybe end with. Time is up. We have the Naval War College here in Newport,
Mm-hmm.
and we've given them gallery space for some of their classes.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a class a couple of years ago before COVID on the history of war. So they had a number of different people, ages in the group, men and women. And at the time, we had an exhibition of artists from the Middle East and North Africa in one gallery space. And in the other building, we had an amazing photo show by someone from Morocco by the name of Lala Saidi. And she had a gorgeous triptych of photos. And it was a woman kind of in a harem like pose, laying on a bed, maybe a foot and a half thick of bullet shells, gold. She was laying on these gold shells. It
Right.
was absolutely stunning. And the students from the War College went over to see the exhibition, and they knew every gun that those shells came from. And the experience was so visceral.
Mm.
And many of them had been over in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it just, we had them come back. I mean, they were just, and who would have thought? I mean, you just never know when those connections are going to happen. And it was powerful stuff,
Was that
really.
serendipity that you had that at the same time, or was that?
Total.
Yeah,
Was not planned at all.
yeah, yeah, they're very
So,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
and yeah, I can only imagine how that would, the reaction that could be. Yeah,
yeah.
that's, yeah.
So you just never know what connections are going to be made by
Yeah.
whom or when.
Yes. Well, we're excited to see what connections you make for us in Tucson. I look forward to you
Well,
coming.
this is one.
Yeah, this is one. No, it's important. Those are the ones. Yeah. And, there'll be many, many more. And I look forward to coming to the gallery and seeing what we've done here over the last unbelievably 30 years. I can't believe it's
Wow.
30 years, but
Bravo.
yeah, I've seen a lot of museum directors come and go. But I can say the last couple we've had have been just terrific. So I'm thrilled that you're going to be following in those kind of footsteps, and that you're so excited about, learning and seeing what Tucson is, what the Southwest is, because
Hmm.
we're our own little world. The Southwest is a different component to other places. And you've had the Northwest, you've had the central area of the heartlands in Chicago, and you've had the East Coast. So you'll get to see the other component of what it is. And it is different. For one thing,
Yeah.
our food is better because we have Mexican food.
I love Mexican food. I've
Yeah.
never been to Mexico, so I want to make
Oh,
sure I
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, it's only, you can be to Rocky Point in 4 hours. You can be on the beach in 4 hours from Tucson, which is hard to imagine.
Mm.
So, well, there'll be lots to learn, Norah Diedrich. I appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to meet you when you get here in January.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you need anything, just reach out. We're happy to try to help.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right. See ya.